Hey everybody, welcome to our next exit. Well, I bet there's a bunch of you that know what this is. It's a bunch of broken sand dollars, and you can find them everywhere. But you gotta walk a lot of beach to find the whole sand dollars. And when I do find a whole sand dollar, I consider that a good walk on the beach. And the sand dollar to me is a lucky charm. I spend a lot of time walking up and down the beaches when we're up here in Oregon, and sometimes I run across some pretty weird creatures I don't even know what are. And I certainly don't consider them lucky charms.
So what are those?
Sand shrimp.
Sand shrimp.
So I think some folks actually eat sand shrimp, but these guys told me they use them for fishing. Salmon season just opened here in the Pacific Northwest, and as you can see here on the Columbia River that feeds right into the Pacific, there's a ton of guys out there catching salmon. And I bet a bunch of them are using those sand shrimp. But Pearl and I, no, we're not really into fishing that much. We come to the Pacific Northwest for the ocean, the beach, and the beautiful weather. It's 65 degrees almost every day. It's pretty close to perfect. A lot of our RV friends end up coming up to this area every summer simply because it's one of the nicest places to spend your summer. Seaside, Oregon has got a great Thousand Trails campground, and so that's one of the spots Pearl and I stop when we're going up the coast and then when we're coming back down. We've also got a couple of our sons live here and grandkids. Now we got great grandkids up here. So it just works out great. This year, one of our granddaughters, Jordan, came down to visit us with her dog, Remy. And in our mind, Seaside's probably one of the best places to be in the Pacific Northwest. Not only do we have RV friends that end up here because of the nice weather and the great campgrounds, here's our son Lance and his wife Lisa and 3 of their kids that they don't live far away and they come and join us. But one thing about Seaside is it's, at least in the downtown and the promenade area, it's built more for these bicycles and pedestrian traffic. It's not made so much for RV traffic. Something tells me this couple here had a sand dollar in their RV. They got stuck down right in the promenade. They couldn't make that turn, but luckily they were smart enough to stop, get out, unhook, and probably within 15 minutes, he was driving the RV and she was falling right behind him in the car. They did a little bit of damage to some bushes and flowers, but they ended up with a nice day. But in a previous life for me, sitting right up here is what made for a good day. But as you notice, this is a Stearman, and then a Stearman, the pilot sits in the back seat. I'm sitting in the passenger side, so that puts you in the pilot seat, because I know how you like to be the pilot if we still had an airplane.
So before you get into any of your airplane stories, I want to give you a lucky sand dollar.
I need a lucky sand dollar. And before these stories are over, I think you'll all agree with me. Go sit down. Just recently we ran into Wayne and Carrie up in Tillamook, Oregon, where Tillamook cheese is made and stuff. So they were up there. We ran into them at Lake Tahoe a couple of months ago, and they were even back at our house in Yuma last winter for some Mexican train and a big barbecue we had. So it's always fun to meet up with old friends. And we did go to the Tillamook Cheese Factory, and after that Wayne said, hey, you guys want to go to they've got a aircraft museum here. You guys want to go there? And that's where this picture was taken. And that's an old Stearman. I used to have an old Stearman just like this. Although it wasn't quite as pretty, it had been converted to the spray plane. And I had the bright idea of opening up a crop dusting service. I had used a GI Bill back in the early 70s and went to a 2-year trade school for airframe and power plant aircraft mechanic license. So I got certified in both of those. I got my commercial pilot license, and then I used my GI Bill again to go to crop dusting school. But fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know, once I got it cleaned up and ready to go to work, there was somebody come through the hangar one day and made an offer on that Stearman. It was looking pretty good, and I just couldn't pass it up. So I sold the Stearman. I never did start a spraying service, but sitting up in that Stearman with Wayne, I got to telling old flying stories, and I got some pretty good flying stories. And Carrie made a comment about, I forgot how she said it, but like flying in one of these planes, it just seems so little and kind of like dangerous and stuff. And what would you do if you had a problem and had to land while you was flying along with just one engine? So it got to me to telling old flying stories like old pilots do. So the first little story I'm going to share with you turned out really kind of fun. It was a little bit scary at first, but it turned out good. This is the plane that we had a flight school. This is our flight instructor. I forgot his name now. And this a Cessna 150 that we used, an older Cessna 150. My first wife's name was Duchess, and then that's me. And our business model was generally Duchess would stay at the airport and man the airport, sell fuel and take calls and whatnot. We had planes for sale, and she'd answer the phone and do that kind of stuff. And I'd fly around the country. I'd be gone a lot of times for a week at a time, but I'd fly around looking for old like Aeronca Champs and Super Cubs and J3 Cubs and Tri-Pacers, and just old planes. It was most of them was built before I was born, and I was born in the 1940s, late 40s. But Duchess got tired of me gone all the time. My brother worked for us also. He was a A&P mechanic as well, and he had his inspector's license, so he could approve annual inspections and all kind of more advanced stuff than I could do. And so he would stay there and run the airport, and she was thinking that she would go with me, and we'd go and we'd find a plane, and I'd fly that plane back and she'd fly her 150 back. But a lot of times, so she wanted to get her private pilot license. She didn't have a pilot license. A lot of times when I'd find something, it'd be too bad a shape to fly home, so I'd have to take it apart. So I'd have my brother fly or drive down, depending on where I was at, and he'd help me take it apart. We'd put it in a truck, a U-Haul truck, and then drive it back. If I could, I would tape them up. I could get a ferry permit with a mechanic's license. I could ferry it with just myself in it, as long as I thought it was safe. And I could tape them up, wire them up, chewing gum them up. Just whatever I could do to get it to hold together to fly all the way back to Childress. Or else my brother would come and would help me take it apart, and I'd drive it back. Or he'd drive it back. I'd fly back in whatever plane I was in. But my wife, she wanted to start going with me and got her pilot license. And so we, one of the first times she did it, we sold the 150, and we was closing up the pilot training class. The flight instructor found a better job somewhere, and so we sold her plane. So she was going to fly her 150. I had a Cessna 170 that I was going to fly along with her, and we was going to go deliver it up in Wichita Falls, 100 miles, 150 miles away, something like that. And it's going perfect, beautiful day. We're flying our own planes along, and all of a sudden she called me on the radio and says the engine tried to die, but it started back up. And then she called me right back and said it just died. I told her, we'll try to start it again, and it wouldn't start. I told her to nose it down and get the prop spinning faster. A lot of times that'll kick it over and start it. None of that would work. Or I think it did start for a little bit, and then it died again. But I told her, all we got to do is I'll go down and fly along the highway. We was flying over a 4-lane highway, 2 lanes going our way and 2 lanes going the other way. So I flew down and got real low, maybe 20 or 30 feet above the cars, and then as they would hold up, stop behind me, I was flying along, and I think the 170 flies about 80 miles an hour somewhere when you're down slow. Normally it's 120 or so. But the car started all waiting, making room for me to land, and then she come right over the top of me, land in front of me, and then I landed right behind her. We pulled over off the highway, and I run up there to check it, open the gas tank, and you could hear air just suck down in that gas tank. So I was pretty sure it was the pitot tube, the little tube that comes down on the leading edge of the wing that lets air go in the tank as fuel is burned up. And a bee had built a nest in there, dirt dauber they call it. Had built a nest in there with a bunch of dirt, and no air could come in there, so as the fuel went down, 10 or 20 gallons, the air couldn't come in, so it made a vacuum and no more gas could come out. So I just got a weed off the side of the road, poked it in there, and was able to get most of that dirt and stuff out. Started it, it fired right up. And we would have changed planes. I would have took that plane and let her fly mine, but she couldn't fly a tail dragger, so she had to fly the 150. But she took it like a champ. She was nervous, you could tell, but she hopped right in it. We pulled out on the road. The highway patrol had come, and they stopped all the cars for us again. And she took off. I took off right behind her, and away we went. We told the guy we sold it to, he went ahead and bought it. We told him about it, and we even sent him a copy of that the newspaper clipping. It worked out just great, and it gave her a ton of confidence to be able to do that. And I was pretty proud of her. So that was pretty cool. So this next little flying story, it's not near as cool. It was a little scary. And the reason it's scary is because these two little bundles of joy, this is my youngest son, Steve. He probably was 5 or 6. And then our older son, Lance, he's the one you saw with his wife and family up in Seaside. He was maybe 10 or so. And we were flying in a 1947 Navion. And the important parts about that, the Navion, is it was in pretty good shape. We thought it was. And we'd flown it to Fairmount. But you want to notice up front on the propeller has a constant speed prop on it. And then more importantly is this cockpit, where the top of the cockpit slides back open and you got like a 30-inch gap there. That's how you get in and get out of the airplane. Or if you had a parachute, you might want to jump out in this case. Well, we were flying from Childress up to visit Dutch's folks up in Reno, Nevada in this Navion. And we had just landed in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We'd filled up and we took off, and we hadn't been in the air 10 minutes. And I started seeing oil splashing up on that windshield. And then in just 30 seconds or so, the windshield was pretty much covered with oil. It had blown the prop seal up on right behind the propellers, blowing the engine oil, letting it come right out, and then coming back on the windshield. And you can't see nothing. When that windshield's covered, you can't see nothing. And we were not up real high. We were maybe at the most 2,500 feet, and Albuquerque's up pretty high already. And we were up maybe 2,000, 2,500 feet. And the service ceiling on an Avion, I'm guessing now we're up at probably 6,000, 7,000 feet. There's not a whole lot higher you've got. So we didn't have a lot of room. We had just minimal room, and I couldn't see. Duchess couldn't see out her side. I don't remember if this is before she got her pilot license or not, but she didn't have much to do with anything. We didn't have much time. I ended up sliding that canopy back, and I'm sticking my head up over, and the oil is still hitting me on the head, but you have a little dead space in there. The air, when it shoots over, it goes up a few inches. So I had maybe 4 inches where I could kind of hold my eyes and not get oil in them. I was getting it all in my forehead and head. And I'm flying, trying to find a place to land, and looking out the side windows I could see out a little bit. And I saw what looked like a deserted road. It ended up being a road that they'd built, and it wasn't open to the public yet. At least that's the way I remember it. But it wasn't real long, and it went over Interstate 40 over the freeway. So I had to get to the back to that road, land, and stop before I got to that overpass, because it had fences on the side. And we made it. We ended up turning around, getting lined up. We get one shot at it because I would run out of total engine oil pretty soon. We landed and stopped right before we got to the freeway, and then I ended up taxiing across the freeway later on because there was a place where I could get out of the way, and we had to leave that plane. I don't remember if we rented a car or another plane, I just don't remember, and went on to Reno, and then we picked the plane up whenever we came back to Albuquerque. But the best thing about this whole experience was hearing this article where Lance says, the reporter asked him, well, was you scared? And he said, no, I wasn't scared. And they said, well, how come? He said, well, because my daddy was flying. And I'll never remember that. That was a pretty proud day. So those are two little stories that I'll share. If you guys like these flying stories, as I mentioned, our business model was me flying around and buying these old wore-out planes that some of them are still in pretty good shape, but most of them were wore out. And they were quite often not quite airworthy. And so I had a number of these type landings where I'd land in pastures and on roads, and I landed up a couple of times and taxied up the gas station, filled up the fuel tank right from a regular automotive gas station. So there's a bunch of stories that can be told. I don't have pictures of them or other newspaper articles, but if you're interested in those, maybe I'll put some of those on the end of our videos or something. But that's pretty much it. That's staying on the Pacific Northwest, how you hook up with your friends and hook up with your family. And for Pearl and I, it's just an awesome way to RV. And then a couple exciting stories. So that's about it. Until we see you guys again next time. I think next time we'll be at Whalers Rest. And I think Jeff and Lori are they've gone up to Chehalis, but I think they're coming to Whalers Rest. Charles and Abby, I think, will be there. So there'll be quite a crew when we get there. So hopefully we have a pretty good video. And until we see that, get to that video, keep the wheels rolling, stay safe. We'll see you at the next exit, folks. Bye-bye.
Wait a minute.
Some of you might be wondering, how in the heck did we get so lucky to climb up and sit inside that Stearman? Well, apparently the curator of the museum there, he heard us talking about some of our old flying stories and whatnot, and that we used to own a Stearman. And he come out and said, hey, do you guys want to get up inside that airplane and look it over? And so we jumped at that chance. And so we started heading around, and he said, well, only one requirement, don't step on the yellow.
Okay.
I got
There's
the engine, dear.
a black catwalk. It's
Just wait, we're gonna get
on both sides of the cockpit that you can walk up on. You know that's where you can step on, and that's solid metal. And it's about 18 inches wide. But outside of that, it's just fabric. It's like your t-shirt with, so we call it dope, but it's just like varnish that
I
makes
did.
it real hard.
I got
Your foot
video
go
of
right
you.
through it. So he said, just don't step on the yellow, hop up in there and look it over and enjoy it. So we did. The Stearman I bought back in 1978, I think I paid $15,000 for it, sold it for 20. This Stearman that we're in right here, that plane will sell for $200,000, $250,000 probably just right away. Amazing difference, so we definitely didn't step on no yellow paint.